Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining us from today. And welcome to this day 3 of our 5-day University of Michigan Africa Week event. My name is Andries Coetzee. I am a professor of linguistics here at University of Michigan, and I'm also the director of the African Studies Center here at the university. Most of my research focuses on issues of language and identity in the complex post-apartheid South African society. And that means that I get to collaborate often with both colleagues and students and also speech communities back in Africa, South Africa specifically. And through my work at the African Studies Center, I've also been really fortunate that it has allowed me to remain engaged with the continent as we work to support all of the various of Michigan's relationships with institutions of higher education and other institutions on the continent. Let me start by expressing a heartfelt thank you to everyone participating in Africa Week, including the many individuals zooming into this meeting from all over the world, University of Michigan students, staff, and faculty, and participants listening in from elsewhere. We have over 700 people who registered to participate in Africa Week, and over the first 2 days, we've already had more than 450 unique visitors, participants in this event. Not only is there a large number of participants in Africa Week, but they also represent a wide range of countries, in fact, more than 30, including participants from the United States, many countries in Africa, but then also Germany, Finland, Spain, the UAE, Korea, India, Canada, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and more. It's really wonderful to have such a global audience. And it's also a testament to the important place that Africa occupies on the global stage at this moment in history. Let me also say thank you to the University of Michigan team who helped put together this event. This includes my 2 main co-organizers for the event, Valeria Bertacco from the Provost's office, whom you met yesterday, and Brody Remington from the University Development team that you will meet on Friday at the closing. And then also thank you to the rest of the team at the African Studies Center who helped a lot putting this together, and specifically my colleague there, Henrique Flores-Bos, who worked closely with us to put together the various panels of this event. And then also the team from University Development and Events who's running the whole scene behind the scenes, putting together this fairly complex and massive international Zoom event. Over the first 2 days of Africa Week, we have focused on themes of health, the economy, and technology, and both the challenges and the opportunities that these present in the African context. Today, our focus will be on themes of higher education, training, and heritage. And our first panel this morning specifically will explore the theme, the role of academic exchange programs between Africa and the United States, and the role that these play in building sustainable, equitable, lasting international relationships. In this panel, we will be joined by colleagues representing Africa-based consortia who run exchange programs between Africa and the US, and also colleagues from the University of Michigan who will bring the perspective from a North American institution involved in these exchange programs. We will also be joined by a representative from the MasterCard Foundation who will bring the perspective of funders who participate in these kinds of exchange programs. Our second panel for today will explore questions surrounding the reclamation and repatriation of African heritage. And in any conference such as this that is focused on transatlantic relationships, we would be remiss if we did not consider the exploitative colonial history that has shaped much of the North's engagement with Africa over the past several centuries, and specifically is still influencing and shaping the kinds of relationships between Africa and the North, and how heritage is represented in our cultural and governmental and educational institutions. In this panel, we will hear from museum curators and cultural activists from Africa who are really leading voices in the global conversation about reclamation of heritage. And we will also hear from two groups here at the University of Michigan, both of whom are involved in different projects about the reclamation and making accessible of African heritage. But before we delve into these two panel discussions, we are starting today with a virtual fireside chat between Dr. Joe Kolars, the Senior Associate Dean of Education and Global Initiatives at our medical school, and Dr. Leah Tadesse, the Ethiopian Minister of Health. Drs. Kolars and Tadesse come a long way, having worked together here at Michigan as colleagues, and also as partners in the relationship between Michigan and the various medical, educational, and training institutions in Ethiopia. Their conversation this morning will explore themes related to models of equitable collaboration, the role of education and training activities in such collaborations, and given their areas of expertise, I'm sure they will also venture into topics related to global health. Joe Kolars is the Senior Associate Dean of Education and Global Initiatives at the Michigan Medical School. He's also the Josiah Macy Jr. Professor of Health Professions Education and Professor of Internal Medicine. Joe's career has been dedicated to medical education and global health. After earning his MD from the University of Minnesota in 1982 and then completing postgraduate training here at University of Michigan, he joined the faculty of Michigan and stayed here until 1996, when he took on the challenge of establishing a Western-based healthcare system in Shanghai, working closely with a university in Shanghai. He then returned to the United States and took up a faculty position at the Mayo Clinic before he returned to the University of Michigan again in 2009 to take on his current position as Senior Associate Dean. Dr. Kolars has extensive experience in the domain of global public health. Between 2007 and 2012, he worked closely with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to, among other things, establish educational and research partnerships between medical schools in North America and in sub-Saharan Africa. Much of his global work has focused on and continues to focus on Africa. And in 2020, Dr. Kolars assumed yet another leadership role here at Michigan by becoming the inaugural director of our newly formed Center for Global Health Equity. Dr. Kolars is a passionate advocate for global health and specifically for the role of medical education in this domain. Dr. Leah Tadesse became the Minister of Health for Ethiopia in March 2020, just as COVID was grinding the world to a standstill. It is not an easy job and certainly not an easy time to take on the job of being at the helm of a national health system. But there are few people as well prepared and as well qualified to do a job as difficult as this as Dr. Tadesse. She earned her medical degree at the Jimma University in Ethiopia before specializing after that in obstetrics and gynecology at Addis Ababa University. And after completing her studies, she held several leadership positions in health education and management, including serving for 7 years as the CEO and Vice Provost of St. Paul's Hospital Millennium Medical College in Addis Ababa, and also acting as the program director for a USAID project on maternal and child survival in Ethiopia. In 2015, we were fortunate here at the University of Michigan that Dr. Tadesse joined us here as executive director of the Center for International Reproductive Health Training, a position that she held until she returned to Ethiopia in 2018 to take on position as Ethiopia State Minister of Health, and then, as I've mentioned last year, becoming the Minister of Health of Ethiopia. Joe and Leah, thank you very much for joining us today, and we're looking forward to listening in on your conversation.